The chair now recognizes Mr. Rogers for the purpose of offering an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read, and the gentleman be recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the Rogers Amendment 2, 4, and 6 be considered en bloc in the interests of time today.
Without objection, the amendments.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve a point of order.
Okay, well, first of all, the gentlelady reserves a point of order, but without objection, the amendments will be considered en bloc. And Mr. Rogers is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I come from a state that's been hit very, very hard. And I have to tell you, when you're sitting at your kitchen table and you work for a small auto parts manufacturer, you kind of have to scratch your head. Michigan is very proud of the role that they played in World War II as the arsenal of democracy. When the United States called them, they went from making pickup trucks in about late 1940 with 15,000 parts to less than a year later on that same assembly line pumping out bombers with over 1 million parts. Helped create the middle class. Rosie the Riveter got their start in Michigan. Kind of changed for a whole generation about how we embrace people into the workplace. So they scratch their heads and think, well, I'm a little confused. This is a great country. Through innovation, the government didn't tell them how to do that. They just asked them to go from pickup trucks to airplanes. Nobody told them to do the Chevy Volt, of which they've spent billions of their own money at General Motors to research and develop and get close to production, or lithium-ion batteries. But now, somehow, we've given up on all of that, and we're going to ask that particular family to pay a very heavy price. We're going to ask that family to pay more for their electric bills, more for their natural gas. And how is this going to solve the problem? Well, what they're going to do is they're going to take money from those individuals, money from small businesses, and we're going to send it to Wall Street to trade in a commodity that you can't see and you can never, ever take delivery of. And oh, by the way, we've even figured out to put a loophole in here for overseas credits. So companies, if they have operations overseas, they get to figure out a new way on Wall Street to get credits there and bring it back and make more money off of the very people who are sitting at the kitchen table trying to figure out how to pay their light bill. And they scratch their heads some more and say, wait a minute, in the last 100 days, the democratically controlled government of the United States forced out auto dealers, about, I don't know, I guess they're up to over 3,000 of them. The government forced them to do that. Hundreds of thousands of people will lose their jobs because the government told them to close. By the way, those are private companies with private assets. Oh, and here's the other answer that they came up with, the government proffered viability plan for General Motors, and I'm going to quote from a UAW letter sent to us May 15th, 2009. They were asking members of Congress to join with them and talking to the Obama administration so that GM should be required to maintain the maximum number of jobs in the United States instead of outsourcing more production to other countries. Because of the government proffered viability plan, they're going to go from, let's see, the share of GM sales in the U.S. market that will be imported from these countries will increase from 15.5% to 23.5%. And by the way, they're going to close 16 U.S. manufacturing facilities. They're going to close them here, from my friends on the other side of the aisle, and import them from places like, and quoting from again from the UAW letter, Korea, Japan, and China for sale in this country. Thank you for working so hard all those years to develop and build some of the state-of-the-art manufacturing in the United States of America. Here's our gift to you. We're going to charge you more for your electric bill, going to charge you more for your natural gas bill, going to charge you more for your gasoline. Every product that you use will go up in price. Oh, and thanks a lot, we're going to ask that we import more vehicles because somehow, maybe that helps our carbon footprint, I don't know. And then they read this in the paper. As Detroit crumbles, China emerges as auto epicenter. They are fast after it, gang. They want our middle class, and they're going to do everything they can to steal it. And what you do with this bill, and what you didn't do by adding India and China is saying, hey, listen, you either need to be with us or we're not going to let you artificially steal these jobs of people who are killing themselves to make it. You say tough. And you know what? You say so tough, and we say, yeah, we know we're going to lose jobs. How do you do that? Because in Title IV, you have Section 422, 425, 426, and 427 said, boy, we know we're going to lose a lot of jobs, and you budget somewhere up to $380 billion a year in a separate program to pay for all the jobs that you know you're going to lose in this bill. And it's not even part of unemployment. You created a whole new government program. So a government program to take their money away from them, charge them more to get up in the morning and use their water and their electricity and make their eggs and their kids to do their homework and to drive to work. You have a government program to do that. And oh, by the way, we know that's really stupid. So we're going to create a whole other government program to give you wages, and we're going to pay for some of your health care for up to 3 years, because we know this is really kind of a bad idea. But you know what? Get over it. It's the buggy whip time. But you know what? The buggy whip went away. We're still going to buy cars in America. We're still going to produce things. And this is what you do. 577,000 Americans earn a mean salary of $44,000 a year making auto parts. Goodbye. 210,000 Americans work directly in auto manufacturing. They earn a mean salary of $59,000. Goodbye. This bill says this. Give these people a break. If China and India don't comply, if we do lose one single job in this sector due to this bill, stop. Let them breathe. Let them send their kids to college. Let them earn and be a part of the American dream. And I'd yield back the remainder of my time.
Chairman, I withdraw my reservation.
Gentleman's time has expired. Are any members seeking recognition in opposition to the Rogers Amendment? Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Ohio, Ms. Sutton.
I thank the gentleman, and I thank the gentleman for his amendment and for his remarks. But, you know, as we have gone through this process, of course, we have incorporated into this bill the Cash for Clunkers proposal, which is aimed indeed not just at dealing with the issue of job loss after the fact, but rather is intended to help those very dealers that we're talking about, and as well as improving our environment at the same time. And obviously multiple benefits are a good thing, and helping consumers while we're at it. And I would just ask my friend from Michigan, as I know how difficult it is, because coming from where I come from, we face much of the same concern. I, too, saw the letter from the United Auto Workers, and it's a rather lengthy letter, and it has many statements in it. Of course, one of the things that it asks us to do is to communicate with the President, and I just don't know. I would just ask the gentleman if he has taken the opportunity to send him a letter.
We absolutely have. And remember, this is the second viability plan that was proffered by the President's government-run car committee to run the car companies.
Well, I disagree, claiming my time. I disagree with the assertions that are being made that the government is the one that is forcing the closings of the dealerships. And I appreciate your yes, I do. I disagree with that. I disagree with that, and
it's
we
the
can
car
have
czar
that
and the car
discussion.
committee who is appointed by the President of the United States.
I understand, but the decisions are being made by the companies on what dealerships to close.
By the TARP.
They fired the
And
guy
I
that
would-
came up with the plan that didn't have
reclaiming
this
my
in it.
time, reclaiming my time. But what I would just encourage, and I look forward to doing with the gentleman from Michigan, is taking steps both within this committee and outside of this committee to pursue the actions to stop the job loss. But this bill here is not what is going to cause the auto industry to continue to suffer. And by the time this would kick in, even if your scenario was correct, those folks would be in a world of hurt, and this would not be something that would help them. We need to take action today, like the Cash for Clunkers proposal and other initiatives, to make sure that the scenario you point out in this amendment that would, in effect, kill the bill, kill the program in the bill, doesn't actually come to fruition. And I look forward to working with you in every way that we can outside of this committee, in this committee, along the way to make sure that that happens. And I yield back my time.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Are there other members wishing to speak on the Rogers Amendment? The chair recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Boyer.
I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for that purpose.
What I've done is I've gone back to my math again, and I encourage all members, once again, do math in the bill. So, Mr. Rogers, I'd like for you to know that the authors of this legislation have taken your concerns into consideration because they have created a climate change worker adjustment assistance program, which is modeled after the TAA in NAFTA. Can I please? And so when I do this, I use the Indiana's wage average, which is $37,770. Now, keep in mind, though, that the national average, guys, can you please? The average is $43,000 according to the Bureau of Labor. So let's just do a back-of-the-envelope math. So I want to address your concerns, Mr. Rogers, that are in the bill. So if it's modeled after the TA new program, displaced workers are entitled to 156 weeks of income supplement. We have unemployment income assistance shall be 70% of the average weekly wage of the worker, not to exceed the state's average wage. So we have a displaced workers entitled to 80% of a monthly health care premium, of which we have an average cost of $1,545. We have displaced workers entitled to 1,500 job assistance and displaced workers entitled to 1,500 moving assistance, job counseling, and training. Now, let's do the math, and I'm going to do this sort of based on Indiana. So on annual compensation, the bill provides up to $37,770 unemployment assistance to workers. If we accept what Heritage says about a loss of about 2.5 million jobs, if I add in just the Indiana, I'm not even doing the national average, so I'll do a little low cost, lowballing here, that comes up to $94 billion. When I add in the health care benefit to this, if we do 80% of the premium, so that's $1,236 annually per person, times 2.5 million, that's a $3 billion cost. If I do the job assistance, provides up to $1,500 in job assistance counseling, times the 2.5, that's a $3.75 billion cost. If I add the job moving, along with job moving is about $3.75 billion. If I do the job training, which costs on average $8,000 times the 2.5 million jobs, that's $20 billion. So you add up $94.4 billion, $3.09 billion, plus $3.75 billion, plus $3.75 billion again, and $20 billion in job training. Mr. Rogers, I'd like for you to know that in the bill, your concern with regard to individuals that are going to lose their jobs, the bill provides $125 billion in job assistance. So what I realize here is that we are going to borrow from the Chinese, but collateral on this loan will be these manufacturing jobs for which you have dire concern about. I'll yield to the gentleman from Michigan.
I would thank the gentleman. I appreciate that you'd bring that up. And one of the things that we have to understand is that in this bill, as you have pointed out, the dollar amount, but there's also a whole other section on the training dollars that we added up that takes it up to as much as $380 billion a year for people they know will lose their jobs in this bill. And there's other programs. That doesn't count one penny of a new government program we're going to create to try to figure out, after we have hurt the poor in this country by raising their electric bill somewhere between $1,500 and $3,100 per year extra, we're going to create another program to try to figure out how we took that money from them in the first place and figure out how to get it back. And I guess our argument on this is there is so much a better way to do this, that through innovation versus this big government mandate of taking and figuring out who wins and who loses and who gets some allocation. And by the way, even the chairman of this committee, the sponsor of this bill, said that he didn't even know what all was in this bill yesterday. So we're going to vote on a bill that we think is somewhere around $2.3 trillion that will clearly cost jobs. Otherwise, you wouldn't have so many different sections in this bill dedicated to those people who you know are going to lose their jobs, and a whole other section trying to figure out how to keep the poor from going under by a new government program to figure out how we get their new cost in energy back to them in some form. Of course, it won't be 100%, because that never quite works when you send $1 to Washington, D.C. And our argument is there is a better, more innovative way. Don't give up on the next generation of Americans. Don't quit on them. This bill quits on them. It says you don't believe that they can do it, that they can innovate, that they can do things like send a man to the moon, as you said. By the way, if they didn't meet that deadline, hundreds of thousands of people didn't lose their jobs. Big difference. Believe in this next generation of Americans, and you will be surprised how fast we meet these goals without a huge government mandate and the largest energy tax in the history of the United States.
Time has expired. Are we ready for the question, or does any other member wish to speak on the 5 minutes that we could take on the Democratic side? If not, we'll proceed to a vote. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Waxman.
No.
Mr. Waxman votes no. Mr. Dingell. Mr. Dingell votes no. Mr. Markey. Mr. Markey votes no. Mr. Boucher. Mr. Pallone. Mr. Gordon. Mr. Rush. Ms. Eshoo. Ms. Eshoo votes no. Mr. Stupak. Mr. Engel. Mr. Green. Ms. DeGette. Ms. DeGette votes no. Mrs. Capps. Mrs. Capps votes no. Mr. Doyle. Mr. Doyle votes no. Ms. Harmon. Ms. Yurkowski. Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. Gonzalez votes no. Mr. Inslee. Mr. Inslee votes no. Ms. Baldwin. Ms. Baldwin votes no. Mr. Ross. Mr. Ross votes no. Mr. Weiner. Mr. Matheson. Mr. Butterfield. Mr. Butterfield votes no. Mr. Melanson. Mr. Melanson votes no. Mr. Barrow. Mr. Barrow votes no. Mr. Hill. Mr. Hill votes no. Ms. Matsui. Ms. Matsui votes no. Mrs. Christensen. Mrs. Christensen, no. Ms. Castor. Ms. Castor votes no. Mr. Sarbanes. Mr. Murphy of Connecticut. Mr. Murphy, no. Mr. Space. Mr. Space, no. Mr. McNerney. Mr. McNerney, no. Ms. Sutton. Ms. Sutton votes no. Mr. Braley. Mr. Braley, no. Mr. Welch.
No.
Mr. Welch, no. Mr. Barton. Mr. Barton votes aye. Mr. Hall. Mr. Upton. Mr. Upton, aye. Mr. Stearns. Mr. Stearns, aye. Mr. Deal. Mr. Whitfield. Mr. Whitfield, aye. Mr. Shimkus. Mr. Shimkus, aye. Mr. Shadegg. Mr. Shadegg, aye. Mr. Blunt. Mr. Blunt votes aye. Mr. Boyer. Mr. Boyer votes aye. Mr. Radonovich. Mr. Radonovich, aye. Mr. Pitts. Mr. Pitts, aye. Ms. Bono Mack. Ms. Bono Mack, aye. Mr. Walden. Mr. Walden, aye. Mr. Terry. Mr. Terry votes aye. Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, aye. Mrs. Myrick. Mrs. Myrick votes aye. Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, aye. Mr. Murphy of Pennsylvania. Mr. Murphy, aye. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess, aye. Ms. Blackburn. Ms. Blackburn, aye. Mr. Gingrey. Mr. Gingrey, aye. Mr. Scalise. Mr. Scalise, aye. Mr. Boucher. Mr. Boucher votes no. Mr. Rush. Mr. Rush, no. Mr. Pallone. Mr. Pallone, no. Mr. Stupak. Mr. Stupak, no. Mr. Matheson. Mr. Matheson, no. Ms. Schakowsky. Ms. Schakowsky, no. Mr. Hall? Mr. Hall votes aye. Mr. Green? Mr. Green? No. Mr. Green votes no.
Mr. Wiener, how do you wish to vote?
Not recorded, Mr. Chairman. No. Mr. Wiener votes no. Mr. Wiener votes no.
What he did? He just looked around.
Any member wish to be recorded that's not recorded, or recorded in a different way? If not, the clerk will announce the vote.
On that vote, Mr. Chairman, the ayes were 22 and the nays were 32.
22 ayes, 32 noes. The amendment's not agreed to.